Over the next 2 weeks, Democratic presidential candidates will make their way to Iowa for the Iowa State Fair. At least 8 presidential hopefuls will be there this Friday for the annual Wing Ding dinner, and it gives the candidates a chance to pitch ideas to fellow Democrats from some of the northern Iowa's rural communities.
Now, you may have heard this before, but Iowa is kind of a key state in this whole primary process. So joining us via Skype to discuss the state of the race in Iowa is the Des Moines Register's chief political reporter, Brianne Pfannenstiel. She's covering the caucuses in 2020. Great to have you, Brianne.
Thanks for having me.
So I have to tell you, I'm actually like a sucker for these torturously long Democratic dinners and state fairs and county fairs and such. But break down for the viewers why the Iowa State Fair is so important.
Well, the Iowa State Fair really brings together a cross-section of Iowans. You get people coming in from all over the state. So more than any kind of political rally, you really do get a sense of all of the different types of people from all of the places across the state. And you get them all in one place. And really, you know, a lot of these events, people are standing up, they're giving speeches, they're shaking hands, but this is a chance to get to see presidential candidates kind of as real people, moving through the fair, having real conversations with people. And so the Des Moines Register, every caucus cycle, invites all the presidential candidates to our soapbox. And so we do give them a chance to stand up. They've got 20 minutes to talk to the crowd. And so they'll bring in some of their own supporters, but it's really a fun event because you kind of see people moving in and clustering around. It's just out on the Grand Concourse, so they're drawn to these speeches, and the crowd kind of grows depending on how they're doing.
Isn't that where Mitt Romney had his "corporations are people" to my friend moment?
I think
Was
so,
that Brianne? Yeah.
It is. Yep.
Yeah. Brianne, I mean, one of the things that we talk about, I mean, DC, everything is very from a 50,000 foot level. Tell us, what are the trends that we're missing from the ground? Who has the best ground game, the best organization? Which are the sleeper candidates? I mean, you've got all the best information here.
Well, in Iowa, we talk about organization being really key because a caucus is unlike a primary. It's unlike a normal vote where you've got to get people to show up at a very specific time at a very specific place and spend several hours in this process standing up and casting their support for their presidential candidate. So organization is really important, and we look to that as a real marker of how these campaigns are doing. And so out of the gate, Elizabeth Warren was really the first to put together this big infrastructure on the ground, and she's had a really impressive start, you know, hiring good people, but putting in the work there across the state. They've opened a lot of field offices. A sleeper candidate in terms of organizational strength is Cory Booker. He's got a big organization here, and when you talk to local activists, they spend a lot of time talking to the Cory Booker team, spending time with that campaign. Obviously, Bernie Sanders, with his support from 2015, 2016, has a lot of built-in support in Iowa. So they're spending a lot of time trying to reconnect with those supporters and make sure that they're still going to turn out for them in 2020. Joe Biden got a late start, but he is really ramping up quickly. He's got about 75 staffers on the ground right now, which to my knowledge is more than anybody else to date. So they're really kind of gearing up, and going into Labor Day, they need to have that infrastructure in place.
Interesting. What about how are people responding to the candidates? Like, who's kind of wowing the crowds or winning the most people over when they speak?
Well, Iowans are a funny bunch because they do want to go see everyone. And so you can't always judge how a campaign is doing by their crowd size, because they do get a lot of people who are just checking out everyone. You know, Iowans say, I want to see everyone twice before I make a decision. And with a field this big, that's a really big commitment. But you see big crowds for Pete Buttigieg. He does really well here. We're heading to some Joe Biden events later today. He's got a lot of built-in support from his past runs and from his time as the vice president. Elizabeth Warren, again, does really well. A lot of these top-tier candidates, Senator Harris draws big crowds. So I think we're seeing a lot of what you're seeing nationally reflected on the ground here in Iowa.
One of the things on the national polls is that people talk about electability. What are I guess, the key things that the Iowan voters that you've talked to about? Is it about familiarity and electability, like in the case of a Joe Biden? Is it, you know, wanting to see really big change in Washington, D.C., the way that somebody would support Bernie Sanders? What are the kind of competing visions? How are they hashing out in the minds of voters in Iowa?
Well, you're really seeing that tension, honestly, between people who do say that electing someone or nominating someone who can beat Donald Trump is the most important thing. You hear that almost across the board. Beating Donald Trump is the most important thing to Democrats right now. And so is that best accomplished by nominating someone like Joe Biden, who's maybe a safer play because they kind of know where he comes from. He has this long record in the public eye, and they feel very safe with him. That's a word that we hear a lot from Iowa voters. They feel very safe with Joe Biden. Or is it better to energize some of these groups of voters who maybe haven't come out in the past? People of color, more women, more progressive voters. And so you're seeing a lot of energy and enthusiasm around that progressive wing of the party too, who people think that that's the best way, who think that the big structural change of an Elizabeth Warren is maybe the best way to take on the president.
Now, you have your eye on one county in particular, Clinton County. Tell us why that particular spot is so important.
So Clinton County is one of these Obama-Trump flip counties. So across the country, everybody's been looking at these places that voted twice for President Barack Obama before supporting Donald Trump. And this is there are 31 of these counties in Iowa. And so Clinton County is kind of an archetype for what you see across the board. It's kind of an aging county. It's one of the oldest populations in the state. It's got declining population. People are leaving there faster than anywhere else in the state. It's got a real declining manufacturing sector. It's along the Mississippi River, so its whole economy is built up around manufacturing and the river and industry, and those jobs have really fallen off. So when you hear people talk about the white working class, this is one of those places. Real blue-collar Union Democrats, Catholic Democrats, who shifted really dramatically in favor of Donald Trump in 2016. It was about a 30-point swing away from Obama in favor of Donald Trump, so not insubstantial. And so this is one of those places where we're talking to a lot of people to see how they're feeling about this Democratic field, whether Democrats can win back some of these people that they lost in 2016.
Well, what's the trend that you're seeing there? How is President Trump doing in some of these candidates in some of these counties which he flipped the Obama Trump? Really, he has to win back and maybe more of those if he wants to keep the White House in 2020.
Right. Donald Trump, just like in a lot of places, was holding really steady among his base here in Iowa. But this is one of those places where you traditionally might think someone like Joe Biden could really make inroads. You know, his big focus on the working class and on unions, we would expect to really resonate here. And we are seeing that on the ground. But as I mentioned, there are a lot of other candidates competing for these same voters. And Clinton County on caucus night in 2016 split almost evenly between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. So there is this more progressive vein kind of underlying things here. And so when you do see these other candidates come in, they make an explicit pitch to the working class and to union voters. And so you're seeing a lot of campaigns really organizing on the ground here. Clinton is not a huge population center. It's got about 45,000 people in the whole county, but you've got 12 different campaigns on the ground there right now.
Wow, interesting. I mean, one thing we talk about here on this show that doesn't always get a lot of coverage is that Senator Sanders does better with working class voters than almost any other candidate. It's where he finds his greatest support among voters under $50,000 a year. But I mean, looking big picture, Iowa's one of these states that a lot of Democrats feel like we've basically lost for the time being, you know, that we're looking more towards Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and maybe we've just got to kind of let Iowa go. But do you think, and part of that is that there isn't a large population of color in Iowa, so you have to win back some of those working class Trump voters, which seems like a further reach than winning more suburban women, people of color, getting people who don't normally turn out to actually show up for whoever our candidate is. But what's your take? Do you think Iowa is in play for whoever the Democratic candidate is this year?
I think it would be a mistake to write off Iowa completely at this point, but because it did shift so dramatically in favor of Donald Trump and in favor of Republicans pretty generally in 2016. But we are not that far removed from two Obama years of success here, two elections where they chose Barack Obama. So I really don't think that Iowa is so far gone that Democrats should write it off. And frankly, we're seeing those same trends in the suburbs here. Suburban women, we talk about Clinton County. I'm focusing on Polk County just as well, where Des Moines is. The suburbs around Des Moines are growing. They're becoming more Democratic. I was just talking with some activists in one of the suburbs just the other day who said we're seeing a lot of Trump converts there. So I don't know that it's fair to write off Iowa as completely lost for Democrats. I think.
And what about the trade war? How does that play for voters in more of the rural parts of the state?
That's a great question because we've seen this drag on for a long time now. And when you talk to farmers, when you talk to people who are directly affected, they say, this is really challenging for us. It's really hurting us, but we're still holding out hope. We still have faith in the president that in the end, this is going to benefit us. And so we have yet to see it electorally really shift.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brianne. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brianne.
Thank you.
Next on Rising, another set of mass shootings, and more Americans wonder, what will Congress do?
Guns Down America Executive Director Igor Volsky is going to talk about the probability of some new gun control laws. That when Rising returns.